pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody. Does anybody wish to address the board at this time in the public forum?
And the only one, I guess,
Wayne?
very short. I just wanted to report that sales tax looks good, although not as robust as the beginning of 2005. But we've only had a couple months, so I don't think it really means anything, but we're keeping that in mind. Installment payment of taxes continues to be very well received. The number of people participating seems to grow every year. In the Northeastern Clinton Central School, we have 704 taking advantage of this service. 364 from Champlain, 291 from Moores. Good numbers. And the January taxes, we have 472 participating. We have about 30 parcels we're looking at right now for foreclosure. I'm not sure when the auction will be, but two of those parcels are in Champlain, town of Champlain. I continue again this year to be chairman of Buildings and Grounds, and we have some major projects. Our first one is, of course, the jail for $23 million. It's on schedule, but it's filling up fast, which is a sad commentary that the jail's filling up this fast. Our Human Services building, that's the old Montgomery Wards building where we have some nurses and we have social services. That's much needed. We're doing about $3 million worth of renovations. We had an air quality problem there and space problem also. And then our third one that you're familiar with is the airport terminal. Maybe some of you have seen it from Route 22. We're really moving. We're on schedule, so that's looking good. We've hired the North Country Chamber and the Development Corp to do some marketing for us, so hopefully that will be successful. There are always some issues there, but we're moving. As you know, I have a conflict with Morristown Board that meets the same night that the Champlain Town Board. So 1 month I'll be there, 1 month I'll be here. But if you should want me for anything or want an explanation or want a presentation, just let me know and we can easily arrange that. You know where to reach me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wish to address the board at this time? If not, I'd like a motion to approve the minutes of February 14th.
Make a motion and request minutes of February 14th.
I'll second.
Is there any questions, errors, or omissions on the February 14th minutes? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Under old business, we have some background checks. Craig, you got something for us on that?
Yes, I do. I'm here to propose to this council new and extremely important town policy. Many residents of this community have children who participate in our youth programs. Currently, the town has no program in effect to check the backgrounds of individuals involved in these programs. I believe it is imperative that we enact a policy that will take these necessary measures for our youth and all town employees. I propose a town contract with Sterling Testing Systems. I have researched this company and have found that they have had a proven track record over the past 3 decades of 99% customer satisfaction. Sterling will offer a 24-hour turnaround time for criminal and sex offender investigations at a minimal cost to the taxpayer. At this time, I would like to make a motion to the board to initiate a contract with Sterling Testing Systems to conduct background investigations for new employees and coaches that participate in our youth programs within the town of Champlain.
I need a second to that motion, if so desired.
I'll second that one.
Okay, like a roll call vote on that probably. Craig?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Jules?
Yes.
And yes for myself. It passes. You have a list of your February code officers reports. You got your zoning board minutes and your planning board minutes. A letter was sent to Linda Benedict, she was approved last month for an alternate for the planning board. And also a letter was sent to Fred Stone and George Nevada for their appointments to the Board of Assessment Review. Letter, we have a hearing at 7:15 for the junkyard application on the agenda. A letter was sent to Dennis Richards accepting his junkyard application. The letter also was sent to Earth Science Engineering Firm. It's an engineering firm that we hired to take care of, to look at possible engineering applications for future development. The letter was sent to Roy Clark Jr. for appointment as town historian. Long-term care people are coming here to use this building, I believe. What's the date on that, Jim?
Friday, March 17th, from 11 to 1.
Okay, 11 to 1 this Friday. American S-Bomb Corporation has sent us a letter requesting water supply that's being investigated with the village. That's on Duval Road. We have that letter. A letter will be sent out to all the new members of the Board of Assessment Review for training on April 26th at 6 to 9 p.m. in Plattsburgh. We have a letter stating the assessment ratio for the real estate, real property office at 98, Julie, help me out.
98.55.
98.55 for this past year. We have a check for franchise fees from Time Warner Cable. For 2,043 hours. I believe that's a quarterly check, I believe. A letter was sent to JCO Board of Directors in Plattsburgh. I was given a seat or a designee of mine on the Board of Directors of JCO. I appointed Mrs. Barbara Robbins. A letter has been sent for her term from April, starting April this year. Just a letter of information that Real Property Service, Clinton County Real Property Services are here every Friday. The dates, 5 Fridays of this month. United States Office of Personal Management requests to use this building for Border Patrol test on April 11th. You have that letter? Something that kind of surprised me, I didn't know about. We got a check for $661 from the county for surplus dog license fees. I was pretty good checks. We have a letter of resignation from the Board of Assessment Review from James Juro. I'd like to accept that letter of resignation. I have a motion to that effect. I have a motion. Juro seconds it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion is carried. We have 2 new names for the Board of Assessment Review. David Coonan, whose term will expire in September 30th, 2007. And Norm Kostovsky, whose term will expire this September of 2006. I need a motion to approve those 2.
I move we approve those 2 people on the Board of Assessment Review.
I second it.
Motion and a second. I'll have a roll call vote. Craig?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Jules?
Yes.
And yes for myself, all 5 of us. I need a motion to approve Gerald Arnold as an alternate on the zoning board. Have a motion, I need a second.
Second.
Motion and second. Roll call vote, Craig?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Jules?
Yes.
Yes for myself. I need a motion to approve Denise Duquette Savage as a full board member on the zoning board. She has been an alternate.
I make the motion that we
Okay. Have a motion? Jules seconds it. Roll call vote, Craig?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Jules?
Yes.
And yes for myself. Alan, are you ready with your report?
Yeah. Okay, on the new truck, it will be delivered to Harrisville tomorrow with the snowplow on. Then it goes from there to Route 11 to get the body put on. So we're looking at another month before we see it. Then I've been cleaning some of the roadsides in the Creek Road. And we've got some other spots we gotta finish cleaning up. And the signs, the road signs that says welcome to Champlain are in Danamore right now. The paint was delivered to them last Wednesday. And I just attended the superintendent's chip program in Albany. That's why I was a few minutes late. We will be receiving the same amount of chip money as we did last year, plus an increase. How much is the increase? It's not been known yet as of today, but we will be getting an increase.
All we can get.
That's right. That's just about all I got.
Okay, thank you. Under committee reports, Jules, you have any report on the building committee?
On building, we have somebody coming in next week to work on that wall for,
Okay,
and he'll be working with Alan to do some of the work
okay.
in between. And that's all I have on building right now.
Grants committee, Greg, I put something in your mailbox to look into in the future. I don't know if you got that.
Yes, I did.
Okay, that certainly can report on that in the near future. Do you have anything else to report, either one of you? Okay, thank you.
Can you look in getting a grant, correct? To fix these cemeteries?
What's that?
Can you look in a grant to fix these cemeteries?
Yes, we can definitely look into that.
Because we cleaned the cemetery up in Ferris Mills the other day, and phew, man, some of those tombstones, you know, just touch them and they fall down and they're crooked. That makes it hard for us to keep up and mold it. I don't know if there's anything you can find to.
Yeah, and if you have any, like, input of where you'd like me to start, I'll gladly look into it.
Okay, I'll get together, I'll show you.
Absolutely.
I tried that a couple of years ago and I didn't get too far. There wasn't much money for that.
No.
At one time, there was some state money, I believe, but it's pretty well dried up.
Yeah, well, sometimes you never know.
You gotta try before you can get it.
Well, that was part of the Association of Towns, is the meeting that we were at in New York City. This grant, there's a lot of grants out there. You just gotta dig deep and know where to get them.
Board assessment review, John, I don't believe there's,
No, I talked to Jim, he said everything was going fine.
it seems to be working well with the county. Highway committee, Jules?
Nothing at this time. Here, Alan's up on his tree cutting. You don't have any problem cutting any high stuff there yet?
No?
And we'll get that sand away from this building here in the front.
No, I'll bet there.
Leave the sand pile in the front of the building.
The water and sewer committee, John Paul, Craig, and Mike Pedro. Maybe Mike can update us a little bit on,
Yeah, we've had a little bit of work being done on the South Street project. Again, that consent order, we should be getting it this month. People from the EFC are helping writing that grant for, it's going to be coming from the Department of Health, the State Department of Health, so they're involved with that. Other than that, that's about all that's happening with the South Street project right now. I'm being told we have to apply to many different places to get money from one, so this is the one and the first of many applications we're gonna have to use to find money apparently. So that's all I have for that.
South Street is a very important project. It needs to be done as soon as possible. The landfill committee, something that just happened, I don't believe I updated you, that well has been fixed at the landfill. There's a well up there that I reported that to the company.
You call them?
I talked to him personally.
Yeah, we'll go.
Town clerk's report, Julie, do you have anything?
There'll be a free rabies clinic, April 6th from 6 to 8:30 at the Champlain Fire Station.
What's the name of that, Julie?
April 6th, I believe it's a Thursday night.
And that's at the Champlain Fire Station.
Yep, from 6 to 8:30.
The only thing we have left is the bill. One other thing I wanted to, I have 4 large pictures on loan in my office. I'd like to have people come in and see them when they can. They're on loan with all these different people. They're marked. Need a motion to approve the monthly bills.
I make a motion to pay the monthly bill, except number 21090.
Okay, thank you. Second that.
Second that. I second that.
Is there any other questions?
One to add to your trophies and awards for 3932. It's a plaque that we got named up for Jack Dresden.
Okay, thank you.
How much was that for?
3932.
It's on my desk right now if anybody wants to see it. Is there any questions on the bills? Roll call vote on those, I guess. Craig?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Jules?
Yes.
Post audit bills? Need a motion?
Motion to pay the post on bills?
Second. Any questions on those? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. We have 2 Article 7s, the last thing on the agenda. We need a motion to approve. They just came in today. What's the last thing? Monthly board meeting. Okay. Need a motion to approve those 2 Article 7s. Julie, you want to read just
Yeah, there are 2 Article 7 procedures. One's Art Bedard. Parcel ID is 19.-1-16.11 to reduce the assessment to $32,000 for the 2005 and 2006 assessment roll, resulting in the refund based on the $32,000 assessment for the 2005-2000 school taxes and the 2006 county town tax. And the other one is Rodney LaValle, parcel ID number 64.-1-12.1. Town will agree to provide an ag building exemption for 7 years and allow LaValle to apply for an agricultural land exemption for 2006. There will be no reduction in the amount of the assessment.
I need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve these Article 7s.
Thank you. Need a second?
Second.
Any questions on either one of them? Roll call vote, Craig?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Bruce? Yes. Jules?
Yes.
Yes for myself. I have nothing else other than the public hearing. Does anybody else have any?
Can I have something to the door after I'm going to be at first?
Yes, I'm about 4 or 5 minutes late now in the public hearing. I'd like a motion. Okay. I'd like a motion to go from public session to a public hearing.
So moved.
Need a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we're in a public hearing.
I'll read the notice.
Yes, please.
Please take further notice that a public hearing will be held at the regular meeting of the town board of the town of Champlain on Tuesday, March 14, 2006 at 7:15 p.m. at the town office building, 729 Route 9, Champlain, New York, as follows. Junkyard application request from Dennis Richard, 398 Leggett Road, Champlain, New York. All persons interested will be given an opportunity to speak or to offer written opinions, either for or against the proposed junkyard application. Copies of said junkyard application is available for review at the town clerk's office. The meeting is open to the public. Other business will be taken up at this meeting by order of the town board of the town of Champlain.
We have a public hearing to get public input on this application. Would anybody like to address the board?
I would.
My name is John Zerlo. I'm representing a group of property owners adjacent to the permit application areas being requested before you this evening. As you're aware, prior to 2003, the town zoning ordinance did not allow junkyards within its boundaries. In 2003, the town board opted to allow the permitting of junkyards when it passed its junkyard and vehicle storage law. This law, however, was crafted, rightly so, with several restrictions relative to the establishment of a junkyard. This was done for the general welfare of its citizens and to prevent these facilities from springing up anywhere in the township. The permit request that you have before you this evening does not meet with the town's junkyard regulations established in December of 2003. First, under Article C, Section 2, Junkyard Regulations, the regulations state that no junk storage area shall be located within 500 feet of any adjoining property line. If you study the maps, I have some, the property in question, you'll easily see that the distance across the applicant's property is less than 1,000 feet, so this regulation cannot be met. Second, under the same section, the law also states that no junk storage area may be located within 500 feet of a pond or wetland, which does exist in this area. Third, under Article D, Junkyard License, Section 2, it explains how one would apply for a license for a prior existing junkyard if in fact the applicant did have a prior existing junkyard. This regulation states that any person maintaining a junkyard prior to December of 2003 within the town of Champlain shall apply for a license within 60 days of the adoption of this local law. I believe the applicant missed this deadline. Even if the application had been filed on time, the applicant still would not have met the requirements of Section C, the 500 feet from adjoining properties. The property owners would like to make notice of several issues. We all have wells, we all have children, concerned about pollution. Polluted aquifer will travel for miles. We all have wells. There's questions about testing, monitoring, burying. There's a lot of issues that I don't believe have been addressed. And we hope that the town board will make the right decision and deny the application. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the board?
Yes. I just wanted to make sure that on page 5 that you did read that section that he was talking to you about any person maintaining a junkyard. If you-
Would you identify yourself?
I'm Joan Doquette.
Yeah.
On section that says temporary section for prior existing junkyard. Any person maintaining a junkyard prior to the effective date of local law 2 of 2003, that is December 30th, 2003, on real property within the town of Champlain shall apply for a license within 60 days of the adoption of this local law. And definitely has not made that since it was April. And it was brought to the attention of the town in May. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to address the board?
I have a letter that I'd like to read. My brother-in-law Larry Bayshard is unable to be here.
Would you identify yourself, Dave?
Dave Sterling.
Very good.
My brother-in-law Larry Bayshard is unable to be here, and he wrote a letter that he'd like me to read on his behalf.
Okay, I have a copy.
Did you want to read it?
No, that's fine. That's fine, go ahead.
Dear honorable board members, it has come to my attention that our neighbor, Mr. Dennis Richards, has again requested a variance to operate a junkyard at his property on the Leggett Road. I would like to thank the board for denying the original request and ask that they again deny this variance. As a property owner in near proximity to Mr. Richards, I must voice my displeasure concerning this request. At the original request, I expressed my concerns regarding the proper licensing and environmental issues with this proposed business. These issues have not been properly addressed, not the results conveyed. There are 5 property owners in proximity to this proposed junkyard. To my knowledge, only one has granted permission for the variance. The other property owners have not been contacted. For this board to ignore the desires of these property owners would be a disservice as an elected representative. Furthermore, the issues of well water for well water safety monitoring have not been addressed. There's been no baseline testing done on my well or that of my neighbors, nor has the frequency of this testing or the continued monitoring been discussed or cost issues addressed. There's also been no discussion with myself or fellow neighbors concerning compensation for the inevitable decrease of our property values. There are also questions that this property is being used against the zoning requirements and restrictions currently in place. I've been asked on several occasions by truck drivers with loads of scrap metal as to the whereabouts of Mr. Richards' metal processing business. The board cannot ignore the pleas by all the concerned surrounding property owners as to activities that have taken place since the initial denial of the variance. Our concerns need to be addressed and these dealt with. This type of business does not belong in a residential neighborhood. I ask each board member here to put yourself in our position and ask yourself if you would want this in your backyard. In closing, I need to remind the board that this area is zoned R1. The surrounding property owners and neighbors have voiced their concerns repeatedly by an overwhelming majority, and they are without a doubt against this variance request. To grant this request would be a grave injustice, complete disrespect of our concerns, and a denial of our rights as property owners. There should be no variance granted, and this property should be monitored to ensure the wellness of our families and the value of our property. It is the time to do the right thing.
Does anybody else wish to address the board?
Yes, good evening. My name is C.J. Madonna. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Richards. In my discussion, I'll try to address some of the concerns that are raised by the audience. First, I'd like to clarify the application. You have a junkyard regulation, and you have a short period of time to apply for it. I think the record should be clear that Mr. Richards did apply in, I think, March of 2003, the original application. I think it was returned to him as being incomplete back in 2003 or not acted upon. But I've seen his, and I'll give you a copy of, seen his application, I've seen a copy of his check, and I believe his check was cashed. I believe he was told that it was incomplete and needed to go back and get a survey. In 2004, I think the same thing, excuse me, I said that wrong, March of 2004. And then last year, we started to get a survey. I think that was completed recently by Mr. Carey, and I believe you have it there. So he did follow up by making a brand new application in 2005 as a follow-up to that initial application. The site plan for the property in question is behind you. I'm going to address some of those issues. Do we have a modified one? Neil, if you can bring forth? Sure. Yeah, the application is for a license pursuant to your town law for the storage of metals and other items incidental and necessary for his scrap business that he has continuously conducted on site since 1988. The facility and use is pre-existing the town's enactment of his junk law license as well as zoning. In support, I spoke to his accountant, who is Star Pombrio. This is a letter saying that since 1991, she was working as a CPA with James Murphy, and she has prepared his personal return since '91 as an individual. In 1992, he incorporated under D.E. Richard & Sons, Inc., and that's the application that was made in 2004 for this junk license, and that is the application tonight. He's making it in his corporate name. I'd like to I will submit this later in support, saying that he has continuously operated that junk business. The license which we're asking for tonight is for the use of that facility that's existing, the scrap metals. I want to point out that the application in question, the property in question, is more than 10 acres, according to the ordinance. He has controlled more than 10. However, the storage area in the actual site is located inside the fence area on the map and back of you. Can you bring that up so, and you might as well show it to the people, maybe. I tried to have it color-coded.
Put it right up there so everybody can see it.
That's fine.
My name's Neil Carey, preparer of the map. It's the same map as what you're looking at here, just with some color on it to make certain areas more evident.
That map reflects that the subject site is more than 500 feet from the public right-of-way called the Leggett Road, and that's one of your requirements. In fact, the map is marked, the access road is 914 feet, it's noted on the map, I think you've had it in front of you, to the edge of the property line in the beginning of the storage area for the property. The access road is private, but it is paved. It's been under the control and ownership of Mr. Richards. That road has been used by the police and emergency vehicles for access to his residence. The site has been patrolled and continues to be patrolled at his request by the state police because of his business operations there. The business site has a building. I believe that's located on that map. It has an improved gravel parking area and a storage area. And it's shown on the map. The storage area is shown with the colors. Now, the paved area, I believe, is the paved road. But on the site, there's a gravel area. And why don't you show that, because it's both the orange and the green?
Well, yes. The orange is some proposed parking and loading area, but the entire green area is gravel, as well as some of the area within this light yellow area. That's some existing gravel there that also falls within the DEC 100-foot wetland buffer. So the actual existing gravel area is larger than the green area shown.
I'll talk about the wetlands. I was going to do that last one, might as well do it now. That yellow area is, the wetlands is the white area with the little tiny areas, okay. The 100-foot buffer is the yellow area. DEC regulations have a 100-foot buffer, which was in effect prior to your ordinance, which basically says you can't conduct certain activities within a 100-foot buffer of the wetlands. I'm showing that on the map. The paved area lies within that. We have no intentions of using that paved area. And if need be, we'll put a fence up or to show that we will honor the 100-foot buffer area. We know of no church or public gathering within 500 feet of the proposed storage area. The storage area, however, as indicated by the audience member, is within 500 feet of the property boundary lines. It's pre-existing. Can't move it. Mr. Leduc has submitted a letter in support. Do you have that letter?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I have a copy.
Okay, he supported it. He is the property owner to the north and to the west of the site. Lands west to the site has some wetlands and some trees and shrubs. When you drive by on the Leggett Road, you cannot see the storage area. At this time of the year, I believe, Neil, you got to tell me because what you told me, I'm doing secondhand. You can see the building, but you can't see the storage area on the ground. It is screened from the public highway. The property to the south is, I believe, a Norman and Kathleen base yard, according to the map. There is some dense trees from there, and I believe you can't, from what I'm told, you can't see the residence, so it's screened from there. We have it's well over 500 feet from the Zerlo property and from the other adjacent property where the property in question is, the storage area. The applicant, your ordinance requires fencing, and your ordinance clearly provides that fencing can be waived. We're going to ask for the waiver. Can you show the fence that we do have up?
There's an existing fence running from the paved road northerly, the entire width of the property in the north-south direction. It's indicated by this light line with the small X's on it. And also the fence is around the rest of the property.
I believe your ordinance requires a 12-foot fence, however, it can be waived because of topography, and I think the key point is screening. This site is screened from the road, screened from the property owner to the south. It's way beyond 500 feet from the other adjacent owners. We're going to ask that you allow the existing facility to operate under the existing conditions and go there and waive any 12-foot high fencing requirement. This is not a normal junkyard. In a moment, I might as well get into what we're asking for. I'll do that in a moment. The applicant is also requesting the issuance of the permit and the waiver of the required setback from 500-foot adjoining property owners. Again, it's existing. So there are two sections that we're asking for waiving. Waiving the fence, waiving the requirement we cannot comply with the 500-foot property owner from either Leduc or from Bayshard. It's just there, we're going to have to ask for a waiver. And the 500-foot setback from a wetlands. We're within 100 feet of the wetlands, and it's been identified. There will be no burning, and there will be no burying of items on the facility or other lands of Mr. Richards. The applicant will comply with those regulations which restricts burning or burying. The most important thing is to know what we're asking for, and I think your ordinance requires us to tell us what we're going to store on this property. There will be no junk automobiles. The only automobiles placed on the site would be exempt vehicles in another business that he operates. He operates transportation of vehicles that are already owned by third parties being transferred up into Canada. They're there for a short period of time. Sometimes they're housed, sometimes they're on the ground, sometimes they're in their trucks. They're waiting for custom compliance papers. Very short period of time. It's an aspect of D.E. Richards and Sons. No vehicle is junk. No automobile vehicle is junk. We're not looking to store that. What we're looking to store is metals. He has a scrap metal. He takes scraps and puts all the copper together, takes all the other metals, separates them, and then basically recycles them and sells them. There also are appliances there, but all the appliances come to the site with the doors off, the freons off, they're tagged, and they're usually separated and put into a roll-off. When he separates his junk, he puts it in a roll-off. However, the metals that he has do lay on the ground. That's what we really have on the ground, the scrap metal pile. If you visit the site, you also see rails, railroad rail yards. He recycles those, okay? But he also purchases those as well as cedar fences. So if you go, we don't consider that junk, but I want to point it out to you just in case you want to, your regulations require it. When I read through, I didn't see how it did, but I don't want to withhold it. We do have those on site, and you'll see storage of those items. We will give the insurance is in place. I don't know if you brought your policy with me. It did. There is insurance already in place, and we can comply with any additional requirements that you require upon the issuance of the permit. Because I'm going to have to, I don't know if you're going to require us to name you as any insured, but we do have proof of insurance. That's the application. Now, let me ask you to see if I don't see anything. There's several mentions about wells. We don't. The place. There are two wells on Mr. Richards' property. There's one real close to the building in the back. Okay, it's pointed near the building near the storage area, and there's a septic system there. Then there is a well and a septic system to his house. Okay. Drinking water is there. We've never had any indication of any contaminations or any of that nature. And you can complain about wells, but we know nothing in your ordinance requires well testing, or else we can test the well. It's silent to it. We know of no reason. The request indicated earlier by Mr. Larry Bayshard's letter indicated that we denied his original request. I've looked through my client's files. I've seen no denials. I've seen that it's incomplete. You send him back, and he had to come back. In my understanding, he applied 2 times. I know of no zoning violations. Are there any zoning violations on the property? There's mention of a zoning violation. In my review of the file and everything, I'm not aware of any zoning violations on this subject property. I believe it's a non-conforming use.
Right.
That's it.
I have a map that I've obtained just recently, the past week, and it's showing more wetlands on that property than what you're showing. This is a tax map from the county.
I can't see that. Is that a wetland map issued by, it's the Clinton County Wetlands map? You marked the wetlands, it shows it over here. I'll let Neil indicate, he indicates that the wetland's pretty close to this. I don't know how they superimpose that. It shows that's the approximate location of the wetlands. I did not have it flagged. I'll be.
This was done through aerial photogramming purposes, reasons to give you an idea of where the wetlands are. This is field located.
Okay.
This is more accurate than the aerial photos. But it's generally the same shape. It's close.
I believe that one shows more on his property.
But it shows less in this area and more in this area. It actually, I've seen this map.
Orange storage area, that border, that's where he was gonna store ground.
No, address the orange. The orange is, I believe, the parking area. Parking and loading areas.
Okay. That border's right onto somebody else's property.
Yes, the subject property is the base yard to the south.
And the road is right on the property.
One of the points is we're not asking for any improvements. All the improvements are there. The gravel subbase, I believe it's about 1 or 2 feet thick. It's already there. It's been in place. We're not asking for any improvements. You require a fence. I guess we're going to have to do a fence. We're asking for that waiver.
Does anybody else wish to address the board?
Yes, I'd like to say one other thing, please. This is John Dugan again.
Yes.
You said that there was nothing, no one had said anything, and you hadn't been in violation of anything. But a lot of times we've brought things up to you, and you wouldn't check on them when they were brought to you, Mr. Tatro. So I have a feeling that if things had been done correctly to begin with, we could have had a few times checked on. There were people seeing things brought in. I had as of June 18, 2004, there was burning. I brought that to the town. They saw it. I didn't, at that time, you couldn't get much information from the town anyway. But things were being done illegally. Just because they weren't set up and they weren't changed or they weren't checked into at that time, it doesn't mean they weren't happening.
Ma'am, I only know of one fire. I believe there was a fire inside a roll-off one time when he was throwing some stuff over there and the fire department came. And it was contained and inside a roll-off. I know of no other fires.
Well, it
Yeah,
did
the
take
fire,
picture
one of
June
the
18.
storage buildings.
Storage
Years
building,
old.
years old.
I know.
This application says that we will not bury and we will not burn. If we're in violation, please turn us in.
Then you have someone check on it.
I think the neighbors can check on it, and Mr. Tatro is welcome to enforce any permit or any license that you issue with any conditions to it. We're telling you that we're going to comply with the burning, the non-burning, and the non-burying.
Obviously, he was in out of compliance somewhere with the DEC back in 2002, I believe it states. This is Mr. Richards' letter to us. In 2002, he was visited by the state of New York DEC and was told that he was in violation and stopped operations. Cleaned up the facility, was instructed to get a junkyard license. So at one time, he was in
Well,
violation.
excuse me, let's go back and do that. You're right and partial. 2002, you didn't have an ordinance. When the DEC came in on a complaint, came in and said, look, you need to clean this place up, he agreed to. The DEC individual spoke to the DEC, turned around and said, look, you need to get a junkyard license. There is no junkyard license in the town, so that was a misnomer. That was Mr. Richards telling the DEC, I'm going to comply with what you told me. I'll stop my operations. I won't do anything. He cleaned up his area. He came in and found out there was no permit necessary at that time. So it's not like saying that, I'm going to stop because I'm in violation of something. The date is 2002. It was prior to the enactment of your regulation. I don't have a client here who's in defiance of some law. The guy said, look, you better go get a junkyard permit. There was nothing in a local junkyard is not a state, but it's a local ordinance, and it wasn't enacted in that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, he said he was instructed to get a license.
Correct. And he inquired into it. And it was not necessary because he enacted it for the following year, 2003.
What was the nature of the violation in 2002 with DEC?
The refrigerators on the ground, refrigerators and stoves, and washing machines, dryers, and they wanted them cleaned up. That was their biggest issue.
Were you cited, actually violated and fined? Wasn't it an inspection?
They came and asked me to clean it up.
Correct. It wasn't an enforcement action, Tom. It wasn't a violation. Man came in, talked around, thought he needed to get a junkyard because of the requirements in other towns. He said, look, I'm gonna come into compliance. He was not issued, he was not fined, he wasn't brought to this board. And I know no other proceedings against you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. There's a big difference on that. I mean, you have a DEC guy knock on your door, here's a guy saying, I'm gonna comply with you.
Just for my information only, I was told, and I'll ask Mr. Richards, I understand you bought that parcel on 2 different parcels, am I correct?
Where my house is,
Which did you buy first, can I ask that question?
is where my garage is, my shop. My shop and my house.
The closest to the road,
Correct,
11 acres, and later you bought the rest of it.
correct.
Okay, thank you. 89 and 96, I believe.
96, so I started building the house in 94, we never did a property transfer until 96.
Okay. But the original property, you bought that one?
88, 89.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. I don't know if we have a copy of the insurance on Mr. Richards in place. Mickey, do we have?
I don't have one yet, no.
Okay, so I haven't seen anything. I'm not saying we don't,
I
but
mean,
I know.
usually,
It does
do you
not
have
need.
one?
I would give you the proof of insurance, as I guess it's like a...
I'll give it to you beforehand, and if you have any requirements that is deficient, Tom will comply with them.
It does not need to be made payable to the town. It
Okay.
has to be, according to the regulations, it has to be at least 200,000, general liability insurance, Dennis.
If you can't get 200, you gotta get 500 or a million.
Well, as long as it's at least, it's gonna be at least 200. So if it's 500, then you would comply, but but it does say that we need proof of that. Okay?
Right.
So you can get that to Mr. Tatro, and I can review it on the town's behalf. One of the other requirements on page 4 talks about hazardous waste, and I haven't heard anybody say there's not gonna be hazardous waste
There will be no
there.
hazardous waste
But I'm
there.
assuming there's not gonna be any hazardous waste there.
That's one of the reasons why I stressed that we're not gonna have junkyards. There's gonna be no oil, no transmissions, no nothing there that's gonna generate hazardous waste. In fact, if you take a look at the DEC regulations on a junkyard and a scrapyard, they have different SIC codes, and they treat them differently. One would automatically require a stormwater management plan if you were gonna create a new one. And the scrap metal's under a different SIC code. I spoke to Fred Dunlop today and got that information. As to whether we would have to get a stormwater management plan, Tom, he was not sure because of the existing facilities and because of that letter I got from Star. If he tells me I need to get one, I'll get one. But I'm just telling you exactly what I talked to him and Fred, and you can follow it up.
Another question I had is on the site plan map, Neil, that you prepared, at least on one of the older ones I have, it actually shows this jagged line, which is the area of, it says an area of pre-existing uses, multi-business uses, which is probably still on this map, even like, maybe at my old age, and I can't see that far.
I can't see that part.
But it looks like a section of that dotted line is over on the Duke's property. And obviously, that can't exist over there.
That's the edge of gravel.
Is that what that is?
That's what that dashed line is, it's the
Okay.
edge of some existing gravel.
Okay, because it does show
Yes.
area, the lines in the map I have, says area of pre-existing uses, multi-business uses. So I'm not saying that's not what the gravel is, but obviously we can't approve something that's gonna be on somebody else's property, nor can Mr. Richards ask for approval on something that's on somebody else's property.
That area is no longer included.
Okay,
And it-
so this
because-
map-
Because it's within the 100-foot wetlands buffer now, so that is not included in the permitted area.
Okay, so it looks like it's been changed from what I can tell on that map, but again, my older map shows it going over on these.
There's been a couple versions of it.
Okay.
You want one that's dated February 3rd?
The one I have, this one says February 3rd.
But it doesn't have the color.
No, Tom's right. Tom's original dot, you did show it going over on Leduc's property, and I don't know what the date of this map is, 1/5/06
February 3rd, so, and
Well,
obviously.
it's the same thing.
So obviously we have no control over that. The other question I had was, we discussed this other business which Mr. Richards has, is temporary storage of motor vehicles that are in transit. Where does that take place on the property?
Same area, I believe. All the commercial activities right at this site, at this facility.
Is it the same area, Dennis?
Basically, the newer vehicles go inside of my barn, inside my house.
Okay, and I see that on the property, and that's just north of your residence, correct?
Right.
Do you store any of these vehicles in the, say, the junkyard area?
Yeah.
How many do you, no, and again, we're not here to discuss that particular use tonight, but if you don't mind me asking you a couple questions about it, how many vehicles, on the average, do you have on site for that?
It's sporadic. You might have one for a week, you might have 4 or 5 for a couple of days, you might have 6, 7 for 2, 3 days. It's just back and forth. No more than 6 or 7 of them.
And they're not yours?
They're not mine.
Okay. The other question I had was about, you talk about junk or scrap metal, and I think, CJ, you mentioned some wood products being stored there. By definition, under the regulation, wood products, old cedar fencing, whatever the case may be, technically be considered junk. So that also should be stored in whatever area that we're talking about. By definition, it says wood products under the definition of junk in the regulation. So that technically would be considered junk as well. And I don't, but aside from the scrap metal we're talking about, maybe these wood products, whether it be the fencing or the rails or whatever the case, is there anything else that would be stored in this area?
No, that's why I was trying to limit my items. Your statute says, your ordinance says identify them. That's why I even threw those in, because I didn't know how you did it. When you say they're junk, we actually buy some rails and we buy some cedar fence posts, but we also acquire them otherwise, so it could be either way, and I just wanted to disclose it to you.
No, and that's fine. That's why I'm asking that question. I just want to make sure everybody understands that, at least by definition, it's junk. If it's going to be in there, everybody needs to know that's going to be there.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a question for the board.
Yes.
Dave Sterling. We are zoned residential. Obviously, we can't do anything about the existing businesses that are there. If he's never been a legal operating scrap business, never had a license for it, how can he be grandfathered in or get a variance for a business that he's applying for now that is not an existing business when we are zoned residential?
Yes, please.
We've had some discussions about Mr. Richards' business at the property. And in particular, I'm not going to pick on Mr. Tatro, but, you know, essentially someone in the town, in particular, in most towns, it's the code enforcement officer, zoning officer, whoever the case, makes an initial determination whether or not the business is it's called a pre-existing non-conforming use, meaning it's there prior to the date of zoning. And I've had quite a few conversations with Mr. Tatro about this particular business. I've never visited this property. I know Mr. Richards from dealing with him in other towns or villages, but I've never been there, so I can't tell you how long it's been there. I don't know personally. So, you know, the person in most towns that makes that call is the codes enforcement officer. And in speaking to Mr. Tatro, and we've had this discussion, I think, at prior board meetings, he rendered the interpretation that this was a pre-existing non-conforming use, meaning that some operation of a junkyard nature was taking place on this property prior to zoning being enacted. With that being the case, it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. Now, aside from that, he still needs to apply for a junkyard license, which had to be done when these regulations were passed. I think Mrs. Duquette raised a question, and/or maybe Mr. Zerlo did, about the fact that he didn't file it within 60 days if he was a pre-existing junkyard. All that really means at that point is that he falls under and has to comply with the regular junkyard application procedure. If he filed it within the 60 days, he'd actually have a year to try to come into compliance with that. He didn't file within those 60 days. I think that's pretty clear from looking at the records I've looked at. So I think we've been considering this as just a straight, regular, new junkyard application. That hasn't really been discussed too much, but I think that's pretty clear what happens if you don't meet that 60-day
Well,
filing
that's my question.
requirement.
If he's applying for a new junkyard application, that's a new business. It's not a pre-existing business.
Well, again, that determination has already been made by the code enforcement officer. The town board doesn't make that determination. I don't make that determination. That's a determination made by the town's code enforcement officer, and that determination was made some time ago. So the business is there, and there's not much that anybody can do about the fact that it's there, other than we can have him comply with the regulations, which is really what we're trying to do this evening.
Under a new license, or a new business, does not meet the setback requirements, and we'll move to that fact.
Yeah.
Whether it's-
It's there. I'm asking for a variance because it's a pre-existing, it's located there. There's a variance under your ordinance for 500 feet from wetlands. We're within 100 feet. We're pulling back to try to make sure we comply with that buffer, and we will comply with that buffer. And your zoning ordinance, your regulation, not your zoning, says you have to be 500 from boundaries. I started looking at how many parcels would comply with that, and it's interesting, but I'm just pointing out that we don't do that. It's there. I'm asking for a variance to the south because it is heavily wooded. It cannot be seen. It is screened, and if you require a fencing, we need to put a fence up there.
And whether it's new or whether it's old,
Yeah.
okay, whether it's a pre-existing or whether it's not pre-existing, you would still have to meet those requirements. The pre-existing provision in the regulations indicate that if it's pre-existing and the application is filed at that time, and technically he has a year to come in with and to meet those requirements. So one way or
The
the other,
amortization period for
one way or the other,
doing
he still has to meet
business would
those
be
requirements.
subject
Or,
to 1-year amortization.
or he has to ask for waivers, which is allowed under it's section 11A, where the board can review that section to see, what has to be met or what has to be considered with respect to whether or not you grant a waiver of a specific requirement which is being asked.
Does anybody else wish to address the board? If not, we as a board have 45 days
Yes.
to make a determination on this issue. I would expect sometimes in April, within the 45 days, to give you some kind of answer.
I'd like to, for the record, just submit the new map in my letter that I have from Star Pombrio, as I indicated to you, and I'll give it to Ms. Kessler.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
As far as the water, the well testing,
Yes.
there's nothing in place right now that would require testing?
There's nothing in our regulations which indicate that we have to, and/or we can require Mr. Richard to go around and test neighbors' wells or have new wells drilled or anything like that.
Because I mean, what I'm hearing tonight is a lot of the concern is over the water and the safety of the water.
Possible contamination of wells.
Now, is that something that this board could put in as a stipulation? And I'm just asking.
I believe the board can attach certain conditions. And other things can be taken into consideration. And again, that's probably in section 10, talking about general consideration. Talks about aesthetic considerations, locational considerations. One other thing that, under the regulations that Mr. Richards need to comply with is also SEEKR, which is the State Environmental Quality Control Review. There is a short environmental assessment form which he has submitted. The one I have is a copy. It's not dated. But that's also something that we need to consider. And if you need to take action on it tonight, or if you take action on it at the next meeting, that also has to be by public hearing. That's the public hearing with respect to SEEKR. And
You can use tonight's public hearing for the same purpose as seeker to, first of all, you need to classify it as a 1 or a 2 or an unlisted. It appears to me, I'd say it's on unlisted action, not knowing any of the threshold that it would match under 617-4.
I would agree with 5 being unlisted action. Again, to answer your question, Craig, I guess specifically, certainly those are things that are considerations. And I understand why neighbors would be upset about the possibility of having wells contaminated or other issues occurring. I don't know what's on the Duke property. I know, in the map, I know where Mr. Zerlo lives. And I see the Barcombe residence. It's Bayshard, I'm sorry. Mr. Sterling, you're here for Larry Bayshard?
Yes. I live there too. I'm one of the
Okay.
neighbors.
Who is Norman Bayshard?
My father-in-law, my mother-in-law is sitting right here.
Okay. Where does Larry live? And again, the map doesn't designate Larry's residence or your residence on this map, so it's hard to tell.
I don't know, Mr. Barco has it does.
see the Racine's property.
That's on the backside.
Correct.
The bigger map. This road here, down here,
Yeah,
they own 5 lots.
it's all down Leggett Road, essentially.
Around the Wagon Road, they own about 5
It
lots.
starts right at Mr. Richards' driveway and continues on.
The Bayshores own.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're located, south of this driveway, which goes back to Mr. Richard's property.
And
They
the rest
came
of
off
the
the Bayshore
land
property.
is my father-in-law and mother-in-law's land.
Right, I see the Norman and Kathleen Bay Shore.
Wouldn't they have to be questioned or contact if there's if I want to build a building that's too close to the property line, I have to have my neighbors sign a variance saying it's okay with them that I build close to the property line.
Well, again, you're right. If we were talking about an area variance, and I heard the word variance being kind of bantered around, variances are things that are granted by the zoning board of appeals, okay? This isn't, Mr. Richards is here seeking a variance, okay? You're right, saying if there was an area variance, usually copies of an application or a notice is sent out to people who live within 500 feet of the affected property. That's something that's spelled out right in the zoning ordinance. These regulations don't provide for notice to be sent to people within 500 feet. It says a public hearing has to be scheduled and has to be noticed in the paper, and there are other requirements that have to be done for that, but there's no requirement under these regulations that a notice be sent out to people who live within 500 feet. To answer your question, this isn't a variance per se. He's asking for some waivers for some of the requirements of the zoning, which I guess you could say it's almost like a variance, but it's not. It's not the same standard as an area variance would be or that a use variance would be. And that's really totally different than what we're doing tonight. So I don't know if that answers your question, hopefully it does.
I have a question.
Yes.
How many trucks a day would be going in and out?
Hard to say, it's sporadic, sometimes 1 or 2, sometimes 3 or 4.
Also, I spoke to Mr. Gilpin, the former town clerk, and he says even though there was no zoning here, there was a requirement for a state permit for a junkyard at that time. Do we have any evidence of a state permit?
What state permit does he require?
Mr. Gilpin said he was issuing them, and he was told not to, that it had to come from the state. And there was a period of time where there was permits this type of thing had to come from the state.
I mean, there may be certain depending on the type of junkyard they're running, there may be things that have to have state permits, but I don't
think so. I think he might be confused. There is a state mandated junkyard section, I think it's 130 or something, but that has to be adopted by your local towns and incorporated, and you did it by your local ordinance. I don't know of the statewide thing. I don't know.
I mean, certainly if you're dealing with like hazardous waste, oils, things like that, there are certain state permits you have to obtain for that type of junkyard or that type of operation. But just for scrap metal or wood or whatever, I'm not aware of any state license that you need just for that purpose. I think Jules mentioned also if you had like junk automobiles and deal with that, which again, if you're dealing with fluids and waste oil or whatever the case may be, then certainly the state would mandate that certain permits have to be obtained for that type of use.
I have a question.
Yes.
You said that there's no oils involved in this, is that correct?
We're not going to have any, not in the scrap metal business, absolutely not.
Okay, well, that's kind of a false statement.
But it's,
Yeah.
we'll talk about it.
Well, I'll tell you, if you're gonna take in scrap washing machines, they have a gallon of oil in the transmission, every one of them.
They take them, they're all tagged and everything is taken out of them. Those are the only types being taken. The doors have to be taken off of the refrigerator.
Yeah, the Freon has to be taken out. Do they take the oil out of transmissions?
Yeah.
Have to,
Boy, that's amazing.
you have to take the oil out of riding lawnmower. You gotta go in the drum inside the building.
Where does that
Getting back to the automobiles, with the state, you need a dismantler's license to take vehicles apart. That's where the state gets involved. That's when it becomes a junkyard. What I want is the scrap metal.
Dennis, the oils that we're talking about that Carl just mentioned, and Freon, if there's Freon, where is that going to be taken out?
The oil, the Freon comes out the dealer, like great plants, he puts a red tag on.
If he puts a red tag on, that means that the freon's been taken out of it.
Okay.
The washing machines, we take the whips off, the electrical whips that plug in, because of the copper and the wire. Then we dismantle the gear casings, because the gear casings are white now. And then there's tin in the washing machine, which goes in the scrap metal box.
If there's oil in them, take that out.
I take the oil off. It goes in the drums.
Okay, so there will be some oil at the top.
Wow.
I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, no, he's right. I mean, we got a lawnmower, if somebody brings a lawnmower in, they're not gonna take the oil out for us.
I understand, I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, you're right.
Just so we have a
Clear,
understand what's going on. Where would that be kept?
inside the garage.
Is that what the garage you're referring to as the metal building on the map?
Yes, right next to the small office.
Okay. So yeah, because I see a couple structures on the site plan. The bigger building is the garage.
Right.
What's usually kept in the garage?
The truck, I use more oil, my air antifreeze for my vehicles, my wash bay is in there, no plow, motors.
And then the other building is your office, you said?
Does anyone else wish to address the board?
Larry, I just have a sample of regular well water here. It's got a quarter of a teaspoon of metal shavings in it. It's regular well water. You could probably understand why we have concern about our wells when that's what it looks like.
This is just a,
Quarter teaspoon.
yeah, but I mean.
Yeah, but it's not from somebody's well.
It's not from somebody's well, it's a
No.
point of water with a.
With regular well
jar of
water, but
with stuff added to it.
quarter teaspoon of shavings added to it.
Understand.
That's why we're concerned about what our water's gonna look like.
Understand. Okay? If anybody else has any questions? If not,
Again, the only thing we need to do, probably address, if you want to address it tonight, is the seeker. If you want to address it at the next meeting, is fine. That would have to be a public hearing as well.
okay, what does that entail?
The seeker is a state mandated environmental impact review of the project. It's also spelled out and specified in your regulations. It's under Article E, Application Procedure, Section 3. I'm on page 6, it's Section 3 at the top. Basically, what Mr. Richards submitted with his application is a short environmental assessment form for unlisted actions. Under seeker and this board, I mean, I know some board members may have dealt, Bruce in particular, may have dealt with seeker before, dealing with zoning or planning board. Jean Paul, I think, has as well, because he used to be on the zoning board, I think, Jean Paul, right? It's a environmental review of a particular project. Most of the time, they're performed by the planning board or zoning boards in the town, not so much the town board, but in this case, it spells that out in the regulations. Under seeker, there are several different, particularly 3 types of actions. Type 1 or type 2, and what's called an unlisted action. Type 1 actions are a fairly significant, large, environmentally repetitive environmental problems. There's not too many type 1 actions that occur. Type 1 actions require a draft environmental impact statement, and probably a good example of the one that was done most recently probably was Falcon Seaport. That was certainly a type 1 action that required a draft environmental impact statement, which is a very expensive and very lengthy process that the applicant has to go through. Type 2 actions are very minor actions, actions that generally are pretty innocuous, a lot of times like area variance and things like that would be type 2 actions. The vast majority of actions that most towns see are what are called unlisted actions, which kind of fall somewhere in between the two. In my opinion, this would probably fall under the category of an unlisted action. And what Mr. Richards attached to his application is a short environmental assessment form. A short form for listed actions contains certain information about the project on part 1 of it. Part 2 of the application is something that this board, as lead agency, when they make that motion to designate as lead agency, would review and comment on. board also could review the short environmental assessment form and feel any more information regarding the project. If they felt that, they could then request a long form seeker, which is a multi-page application which the applicant would prepare. It just gives more details about the project. And that again is up to this board to decide. If this board would again take some time to review that or want to review that, if it doesn't feel that it's appropriate to address it this evening, that's fine. But if we were going to do it at the next meeting, we would still have to have a public hearing on that because secret does require a public hearing. But that is something that we need to do prior to making any decision on the project by your own regulations. I hope that explained that.
If I'm reading this correctly, I'm assuming I'm reading the same one you were. About 2/3 of the way down, you've got it listed as residential, commercial, and agricultural.
What is the present land use
Yes.
in the vicinity?
Am I correct?
Mine's not dated, so it's hard to tell, but, yeah, but he has that check. It says it says mixed uses in vicinity. He has checked residential, commercial, and agriculture. Yeah, correct.
There is no commercial other than this residential.
I'm assuming he's referring to his own property by saying that.
So your advice to us, have that done?
My advice to the board is it's something we need to do.
Yes.
Certainly. Whether it is this evening or whether it's at the next meeting, that's at the board's discretion. Before we can actually complete the review, we need to have a motion made that this would probably fall in the category, in my opinion, of an unlisted action, and that the Town of Champlain Town Board be deemed lead agency. Whether the town board would want more information than presented on this is really at your discretion. With unlisted actions, you can ask for a long form seeker, which is contains more information, more answers that the applicant would have to complete.
These are all environmental issues, though?
Yeah, seeker only deals with environmental issues. And if you look at part 2 of it, it goes through several different issues. And it goes through, could the action result in any adverse effects associated with the following? And it deals with existing air quality, it says surface or groundwater quality or quantity, noise levels, existing traffic patterns, etc. Aesthetic, agricultural, archaeological things, vegetation, fauna, the community's plans or goals, growth, subsequent development, various different, issues. And then it comes down to what the board feels. Is there, what are the odds of there being problems? Are there significant, is there possibilities that there be large or significant adverse impacts? Are there possibilities of just being minor impacts? It comes down to what the board feels. But it is somewhat significant because the board feels that there's one or more potentially large or significant adverse impacts. Then essentially, a full EAF would have to be completed by the applicant. It would require more documentation.
This does address groundwater quality, noise levels, and existing traffic patterns.
Again, that's something that the board would have to comment on, as to whether or not they feel there's impacts, and then you have to classify the impacts as whether they're potentially large or they're small. Small impacts generally don't result in any negative findings against the applicant. Potentially large impacts could require the applicant to complete a full EAF, which is environmental assessment.
Do we only need to do this if the application is approved?
No, you need to do it regardless, because
Okay.
the regulations require you to do it.
Okay.
If the board, and again, I don't know, where the board, we're just having this discussion this evening about this, and if the board wants time to kind of study it more, that's fine, but it does have to be done before a decision is made on the application.
Okay. We probably should schedule a public hearing then for next month. Would that be appropriate?
Could we do it beforehand and then address both of them on the next board meeting?
Absolutely.
Could we have a special meeting?
Seeker would have to be done first, because it's required that it be done.
Right.
And then, yeah, a discussion or a decision with respect to the application can be done immediately afterwards, yes.
Because we have 45 days from this public hearing
To make a decision.
to make a decision. And if we have more questions, it would probably be within the better interest of this board to do it before the next meeting, so that we're not.
Do we still have 45 days after the seeker hearing?
45 days from the public hearing, which is today.
Today.
Unless, it can be extended if agreed to by the applicant and by the board. That is mentioned in there. That's something we'd have to talk to Mr. Richards and his counsel.
This second page, is this part of the short form?
That's the part we complete. Part two is for our completion. Part one is for the applicant, which is the first page.
I believe we should, if it needs to be done, whether we approve or not disapprove, we need to schedule a hearing on it.
And again, I think it's appropriate for the board to maybe take a little closer look at that. Because we were, I think, more going into some other issues with respect to the regulations rather than seeker. So rather than trying to make a quick decision this evening on it, I think we should probably schedule a separate public hearing to deal with seeker. That's my opinion.
Next Tuesday, whatever is good for.
We have 45 days.
We gotta publish this in the paper?
Yes, we do.
There's a time limit there? You know how many days, is it 5 days ahead or something?
Get 5 to 10. But they can do this at the next town board meeting.
Absolutely.
Would it be agreeable to do this at the next town board meeting and still have 45 days, Mr. Richards?
You understand what he's asking for, CJ, basically?
Yes, I do, and no problem. I mean, we've waited this long, what's 45 days? No problem.
We will schedule the next secret hearing for our next board meeting, and we still have the 45 days.
Can you do it at 7:30? I usually have
I was 5 minutes
other
late tonight.
things, and
I had no problem with that.
thank you.
We will schedule a hearing for our next board meeting in April, which will be the second Tuesday.
We need a motion.
I make a motion that we designate ourselves as the lead agency, the Town of Champlain Town Board, and then we set a public hearing for our next regular meeting
It's Tuesday, the
at
11th.
7:30.
7:30.
The only thing I would ask, if you could combine with that motion, is that this application be deemed an unlisted action. I'm not, the board still reserves the right to ask for more information or ask for a long-form seeker, but I think we do need, coupled with the lead agency motion, need to have established this falls into the category of an unlisted action.
Okay, I'll add that to my motion to be designated an unlisted action.
Do we need more information from the applicant?
Well, that's something that's up to the board. I think if the board reviews this and decides, reviews this and the short environmental assessment form, if the board feels they need a long-form seeker, then that's something they can request the applicant.
Should we do that before next meeting or at that meeting?
Tom, just to make it easy, you guys can talk as long as you give me about give me 10 days, 2 weeks. If you decide that you need more information, let me know and I'll provide it to you. You can talk amongst yourselves later and if you do think it's necessary, let us know. We'll provide it to you.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
I have a motion. A second. Did somebody second that? No? To schedule the hearing for April 11th, Tuesday. I have a second to that motion?
Second.
I have a second. I'll take a roll call vote on that. You have a question?
More of a point, I guess, is that on April 11th, I may be gone, I may be on vacation, I may not be.
We've agreed to extend it to whatever is necessary. If you want to make a special meeting, just let me know. Tom and I can check our calendars. But, Tom, you just have to make sure we get it 5 days. I think maybe even 8 days in advance, we get it in the paper, whatever.
Yeah. I don't know what the town board policy is about special meetings. I know everyone else has other schedules, and I apologize for the inconvenience
That was my next question. Should we have a work session? This is not something easy to put.
Certainly, I'm at the board's disposal as far as you want to have some kind of work session in advance to talk about seeker. Then if we do need and/or require additional information from Mr. Madonna, I can correspond with him and ask him for that, and then perhaps have this public hearing at the May meeting.
My question, Tom, is that we have 45 days from today.
He's extended it by virtue of what they've said tonight.
Okay, so that's out of plan at this point,
Correct.
okay?
And that's what we're having that discussion about.
Because if we were requiring more information,
We're bumping into that, that's right.
okay.
And it's my understanding, for the record, Mr. Richards has agreed to extend that 45-day period of time. I don't want to say indefinitely, but at least, I'm going to say through, at least to June 1st. CJ, would that be agreeable?
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, I'm just trying to pick a day somehow.
Are you coming back on vacation?
Well, I'll be back well before that. I'm just saying, if we have a meeting in May,
I'd like to address the issue as soon as possible.
why don't we plan on having maybe a work session?
Are you up here for the regular zoning meeting?
I'm up here for the regular zoning
Can
meeting.
you do it that evening, later?
This Thursday evening? This Thursday? Yeah.
I can't do it this Thursday.
Okay, zoning is this Thursday, planning is the following.
You'll be gone there, or you'll be here?
No, I'll be here then. I'll be here, as far as I know, I'll be here at 6.
Is that agreeable? April 6th?
Work session.
Yes. Does that have to be advertised? Should be.
I think it does, if in fact there's going to be more than a quorum present.
Okay.
For the open meeting law.
What time are we going to do that at?
7? Is that agreeable?
Need a motion?
Yes. Earlier that evening at 5, we have a shared services meeting with Russell's Point, only lasts about an hour, so 2 people going to that.
And then 6 o'clock.
6
is the
o'clock is the planning board.
So it would have to be set.
Yeah, and I don't know what's on the agenda yet for planning.
One application.
Yeah, so 7 would be fine.
Okay, 7 o'clock, 7? April 6th? That was a motion, that wasn't a motion.
Can we just add that to the motion?
I don't know that I need a
Well-
motion to call a work session, do you?
Probably don't, but I want to backtrack for 1 second. Julie, there was a motion made and it was seconded. We probably need to have these regarding the public hearing
On April,
in April 11th. So
We have
that
to change that.
motion should be withdrawn.
Or we can just change the date to May 9th.
Sure.
Have that public hearing on May 9th. The
What?
seeker,
no, the secret,
public hearing, the seeker form review on May 9th. Because he can't attend the April 11th meeting.
but he said he'd be here on the 6th.
Yeah, but that's just
That's
a
just a work
workshop.
session.
Okay.
I think the public hearing on May 9th should be fine. Work session on April 6th would be fine.
Agreeable?
Like someone from our side to show up at your work session, maybe in half an hour, just in case you got questions?
No
If you
problem.
want us, if you think you want us, just let me know. I'll make myself available if you want. Or I'll send you. He's got all the info.
work session?
I think we'll probably just come in, just review the information given to us so far and see if we can make some determination as to whether or not we need more information, I think, for the most part.
Fine.
Julie, you can modify my motion if necessary.
Yes.
Want to read the motion for me?
We have a motion by Bruce Segwin to hold a public hearing on May 9th at 7:30 for seeker form review.
And that we be
And then on
designated
April
as the lead agent.
agency and unlisted action.
Correct.
And on April 6th, there will be a workshop session at 7 o'clock.
Fine. Everybody understand the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. April 6th and May 9th. If there's nothing else, I oppose the public hearing and then go back to the public board meeting, public session.
Make a motion to close the public hearing. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried. We're back in the public session.
Dennis, can you get us proof of insurance and, it's good to get Mr. Cahill?
Mark. David, I had this letter copy that you read. I gave it to Julie. It's in the minutes of this hearing. Okay?
Thank you.
That's my idea. For information only, I got a letter today to council supervisor and council members to Eagle Scout Award for Ken Del France. He's making Eagle Scout on April 8th. It's coming real quick. Before our next meeting anyway, so I have to read it tonight. It's in Moore's. He's a resident of Champlain. Town board's going to invite us to that. Jules, you had something? Thing for the board?
Yes. Right.
Yes, go.
The New York Trading School annual meeting, February 19th to the 22nd. Greg and I attended so many meetings, all the meetings, but we went to separate meetings. Number one, I met with Senator Schumer and thanked him for doing the work on the Champlain Port, and also Bruce Craigton. I know talk about Homeland Security. It seems though that we're getting more troopers. I don't want to comment on what I said, but maybe Craig does.
We're very clear.
Of what?
We were very clear with what you told him. Caught me off guard.
He got a lot of education on things that are done up there in New York. The 19 resolutions were passed as written. If any council member who has any questions on them, this is a formality that they do these in. There's no argument, you either yes or no, and they all pass.
And I got a copy of those today in the mail.
And I also got some literature on some village stuff that goes on, which probably we need in the village of Champlain. And I got quite a bit of literature on shared services for highway, which I gave Alan this thing, and we gotta go through some of this, because some of the stuff that we're doing has to be rectified for insurance purposes and so on and so forth. Where we have to give them the power to go to these places without having movie.
You give me the power, you give that direction, you also.
And I also attended the class on town-wide and town-outside, which is something that we'll have to work on at budget time, on tax rates.
Okay.
And it was a very good session on that part of it. And that's about it. Greg wants to talk.
Greg, do you have anything that Jules did you want to tell us about?
No,
Homeland Security is the best.
a big emphasis was put on education and getting the state more involved and keeping our, increasing our state aid for education. And volunteer firefighting is a major concern because the state is putting more and more requirements on volunteer firefighters, and these people have other lives too and jobs, and offering more incentives, to keep our volunteer firefighter base the way it is, and it's been diminishing over the years.
Thank you. Does any other board member have anything before the board? I do need an executive session to discuss union contract. If I could have a motion to that effect.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We've got to go to executive session. We'll be back for closing arguments. Closing arguments.